Hello everyone. I hope you're there. I hope you've managed to join us. Well, we would normally at this time, or I would normally at this time, be at the Sofitel Hotel where we'd be holding Pilot Careers Live. It would be towards the end of the day. We would have had, hopefully, up till now, they've always been great days, lots of great information, lots of seminars, lots of ATOs talking, lots of great people to meet. But unfortunately, clearly, thanks to COVID-19, that hasn't happened, and we had to cancel that event. So what we've done is just a small token. We've got together some people, basically PlaneOldBen and Mentour Pilot, to come and talk to us about this whole thing, and really to answer your questions later on in the live stream. So let me just bring everyone in. Hello, how are you all doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having us on this show.
I've just got one message from Corwin saying no sound, which is
oh no.
I take it you guys can hear me, can't you?
Yeah, I can still hear you great.
Okay, everyone can hear us. So Corwin, maybe, hello Rebecca, can you hear us? If you can't hear us, maybe it's your end, I'm not sure. Anyway, let's move on and see how we get on. So how's everyone been? What have you all been doing? Nothing, I guess.
That's great. Ben, what have you been up to?
I've not been doing too much. I've been getting into my home simulator again, actually, which has been really good fun. Just practicing raw data, IFR, like NDB holds or ILS approaches, that sort of stuff, in different aircraft. And I've actually really been enjoying that, because it's amazing how realistic they are nowadays.
Oh yeah. The X-Plane 11 and all of those are crazy good at the moment.
Yeah.
I have been working a lot more on the Mentour Pilot channel. It's been really a godsend to have something on the side of flying that you can kind of get your own, because if I didn't have that, I think I would be climbing the walls by now. So it's been a lot of extra work on that.
Yeah, I've managed to resurrect some old videos. I was fortunate I had a bit of a backlog from some VFR flights from last year. And I'm also looking back on some of the commercial training that I did, and I'm going to release some shorter series just from the CPL or in the DA42 doing the IR stuff, and maybe go on that sort of line. So yeah, I agree with you. It's good to get some content and work on it.
Good.
I have to say, Ben, the fact that you're flying on a simulator NDB holds, that is just a sign of how bad things have become in this world.
Oh no, I'm actually kind of enjoying it, because you can mess around with the wind. So like, I'm doing like stupid things like I don't know, 180 degree like the wind at 60, 70 knots, and seeing if I can do it. It's all right fun. Just
yeah. Fortunately,
I haven't gotten that far yet. No,
I'm not that far yet. So clearly, this is not. These are very unique times and very different times, and for people who would have been coming to the show would have likely to have been either about to begin their training or thinking about beginning their training, would have been in training, or in some cases would have just finished training. And clearly for those in training at the moment won't be doing any training for the most part, unless they're doing a remote ground squad, I guess. Those who've just finishing their training are going to have a tricky time of it at the moment, finding a job. So have you got any, I mean, what's your take on this? I mean, I've been around for a bit, and there was obviously 9/11 and the financial crash, so it's a cyclic industry. How about you guys? What's your take on that? Let's try and give some full screen action here. So let's go to Mentour Pilot first, see if we can do that better.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I mean, there's no question about that. This is a crisis that is bigger, globally. This is a global crisis, so there's no question that this is bigger than anything that I have seen during my career so far. And I have, just as you, Ian, seen what happened after 9/11. I saw what happens during the SARS epidemic, the 2008 financial meltdown. So this is different in some ways, but it's also similar in some ways. And I feel that, yes, there is going to be a tricky recovery from this. The airlines all over the world have been hit very badly. So I think that the situation that we will come out into is going to be different. Like the airline business is going to look different when we get out of this. Now, exactly how that will shape up is very hard to predict at the moment. But there's one thing that I think is absolutely clear, and that is that little by little, we will come back maybe it will take a year, 2 year, 3 year before we come up to the same amount of traffic that we have back in 2019. But eventually we will get back to similar level to what we had. But because the travel industry, basically people all around the world have gotten used to traveling. There might be that there are changes in travel patterns now. We might see less of these micro trips that we've gotten used to seeing in Europe. They might turn into more long haul trips, for example, something like that. We don't know how that's going to turn out, but people love to travel. People love to move, to see each other. And I think that is not going to go away with this crisis, which means that eventually we will come back. But there's no question about, the next 2 years or so is going to be rough for the industry, and we'll see which players are left standing after this.
Yeah. How about you, Ben? What's your take on the whole thing? I don't know how much you want to say, but you've obviously got a fairly fresh approach to it, should we say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was sort of doing quite a lot of domestic flying in the UK with Flybe and the Dash. So I think that's one aspect that might come back a little bit quicker, more so than the sort of the holiday charter airlines. I believe people that need to travel in the UK and to use a company like Flybe, if that comes back again, who knows? I think they're going to continue to travel. I'm unsure what people are going to do in regards to sort of the micro trip, like Petter said. Will people be just going on a mini breakaway? Will they travel in another direction? But I do believe that it is going to come back, and it is cyclical. There's sort of talk in the news constantly about a world pilot shortage and X amount of pilots needed in the years 2030, 2040, etc. So I believe it will come back, but it's just hard to predict at the moment when and how exactly it is going to come back. And I get a few messages from people in regards to when should they start training, should they start going now, should they delay it. I just think maybe everyone just needs to sit on the hands for a few more weeks, and that'll give you a bit more information on what's best to do, or just go with your gut feeling, really. All these variables that have to be taken into account with people's own personal circumstances in regards to how and when they train. Just give it a little bit more time to think about it.
Yeah, it's often said that beginning your training during tough times is not a bad time to begin. And certainly if there was any training available tomorrow, if you could pay your money and sign up tomorrow and start tomorrow, not that you can actually do that, you're unlikely to come out of the other end of that system for probably 2 years, maybe even more at the moment, depending on the route you actually take. And you're trying to predict from today, April 2020, is what the airline industry and the world's going to look like in April 2022, 2022 and a half, 2023 at the earliest. And frankly, if you could do that with any accuracy, then you ought to be making tracks for your stockbroker and investing some money. So I don't know. That's also said to be a kind of slightly cynical thought. How do you feel about people starting training? I mean, clearly there are other challenges at the moment, like actually finding the funds and finding the trainers to get it done. But if all that is equal, what do you think about starting training and pacing your training to try and finish at some stage in the future?
Well, I mean, I agree with what Ben was saying there. I mean, if you are going to attack this as an airline pilot would attack a problem, I actually did a video on that not too long ago, where I talked about the real importance of defining what the problem is, getting information, finding out what your options are, and then selecting an appropriate option and executing and evaluating to go. We call it PIOC, and we always do that. And now is definitely a time to do exactly that, no matter what stage of training that you're in. But you're absolutely right in that there's always been a saying when it comes to flight training, is that when there's very little or no jobs, that's when you should be training, so that you're trained when there are jobs. So it's always going to be a little bit counterintuitive when you go into training. However, of course, this being a slightly different crisis than what we've seen, that might make it a little bit more complicated to take those decisions. But this is exactly the kind of questions that we are trying to answer now in the Airline Pilot Club. So, that we know how incredibly hard it is to find accurate and reliable information in times like this. This is one of the reasons why we started the club in the first place, even though our initial emphasis was to try to find funding for people and to try to guide towards the correct flight schools. Now we find that the information bit is what is the really important thing, because people have exactly these questions and they need to be answered. And it's very, very hard if you are someone going into training right now to even know who to listen to. So it's complicated right now. I do still believe that there will be a need for pilots coming in. We do have the baby booming generation. They will go into retirement now, probably even quicker now, because you see airlines like, for example, offering pre-retirement deals in order to slim down their organizations. So that might even quicken things up a little bit, which is going to hopefully help. But yeah, like 2 years down the line, it's very hard to see what
the situation is going to be. Ben, how about you? What's your view on?
I think it's a really interesting point about the baby boom generation. That is something that I've thought about quite a bit. They will age out at some point, and that's going to create a vast gap within the airline business. I think at the moment, maybe if people are unsure, one thing to consider is that modular training routes, or just getting started a little bit, and it all comes down to funding and how you can pay for it all. But maybe modular is a good way of doing it. You can start chipping away until some advice is clearer out there. And I also agree that people are struggling to find out the correct information at the moment. People ask me my opinion, and they'll research online, and there'll be different opinions out there from other people. So yeah, I just think maybe just try and get started a little bit. If you've never done any flying, you're considering it, go and have a few flight training lessons when things open up, and try and spark the flame a little bit more.
Yeah, so I wrote something the other day, a short piece on sort of 3 golden rules. I won't go through the whole thing, but the first golden rule was don't believe anything anyone tells you, and that includes this. And what I really mean is not don't believe us, but don't just listen to one piece of advice. No. We've all got a tendency, the human beings have a tendency to find one piece of advice that suits their particular outlook and their frame and go, that's it, I'm hanging on to that. That's a really dumb thing to do. It's a dumb thing to do if you're a pilot. Oh, look, that weather's great. Everywhere else says it's rubbish, but I've just seen this. And it's so you have to do your research. You have to go and collect the different data sources.
Exactly, and look very carefully at what your sources are of that information. What incentives do these sources have in order to give you that information? And that's why it's so important not to listen to, like you say, to the echo chamber of just people that tells you what you want to hear. You want to have information from things like competent authorities. What are the authorities out there actually saying? Because they will be indicating very clearly whether or not they see it as a crisis or not, and what they're doing about it. And from that, you can read a lot into what you should be doing. But then, of course, you can be listening to the likes of airline unions. You can be listening to the likes of flight schools and flight training organizations as well, because they will have different competencies and they will give their frame and their point of view. And together, if you have all of that together, then you can kind of build your own picture of what it looks like and what is going to be important for you. But like you're saying, Ian, you cannot latch on to one thing and believe that, because that's might be wrong.
It's very comforting sometimes when you find something that supports your view of the world to just latch onto it.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, that's just a kind of little fool's decision, really. And you need to continually pick up information and reevaluate. Changes and circumstances change. What's
Absolutely
true today won't be true in 3 months' time, or 3 weeks, or maybe even 3 days. Who knows?
Because you're like exactly like Ben was saying before about the modular structure, which is something that I have always talked about. Is like the benefits of shipping away, on making sure that you're not too much in debt, because that will give you a lot more flexibility. That is true, but on the other side of that, you also have that when the economy is very good, when there's a lot of jobs out there, then the airlines will be picking pilots pretty much from anywhere. Wherever they can find good, competent pilots, they will take them. But in times where it's really, really poor, as in when there's few jobs, it's more likely that airlines will latch on to specific flight schools that they have some kind of track record with. And that tends to be the integrated training schools, which then gives you the opposite opinion, like, should I go modular or should I go integrated now when the economy is bad? So it all of this together gives a very, very complex picture of what's going on,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember talking to an airline recruiter who was explaining the difference. She was talking to me about the difference. Her particular airline viewed integrated modular, and she had a preference for modular students because she kind of thought it required them to do a little bit more, to be a little bit more proactive in life. On the other hand, she said the view was when she took an integrated student from a recognized school that she had a relationship with, the variability in those students was this much. The variability in the modular students as a whole was much more. So if you're a modular student, there's probably a video to be done at some stage in the future about ensuring themselves the best chance.
Yeah, there's always, and I mean, those kind of things, you can kind of see it from an organizational point of view, that if you're an airline that needs to recruit very few people, very few pilots, then probably what she was saying is probably correct, because then you can go in and probe into the individual pilot in a slightly different way. But if you're looking at scale for hundreds of pilots, for example, then the quality, the overall quality of the people that you're assessing becomes even more important. So like, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's what suits you out there, who's, you know, what your situation is, you know, what age are you, what you want to try to achieve, what's your social patterns, you know, do you have a family, what's your economical patterns, all of that. It's as important now as it's always been.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So turning to those people who are finishing training or have finished training or just about to finish training, clearly the days have gone where they could walk out of training and straight into a job, at least temporarily. That, you know, that's not going to be the case on Monday. Not that anyone's finishing training today, but metaphorically speaking, what advice would you give those people in order to sort of stay engaged in the industry and remain, to give them the best chance of finding a job when there is an upturn, when openings appear? Ben, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, I'm in a really similar situation, having come out at the end of the flight training environment, got my first job, and unfortunately the airline has gone on a downturn due to COVID-19. So, I mean, the things that I'm personally doing is talking to friends in industry that are still working, keeping my ear to the ground, having a look at sort of the, you know, Pilot Careers News website, all those sort of things, trying to keep engaged and keep talking to people. And I think, you know, the old advice, which has always been take whatever the first job is, probably nowadays is as important, really, for new people coming out of flight school. I mean, I'm excited about the opportunities going forward. I do think there is going to be an upturn, but as we were saying before, it's just as and when. So talk to people you've met through flight school, try and engage with your flight school to see if they're able to open up any particular options with an airline for you. To just do as much as you can every single day,
even up to and including flying NDB holds on a flight sim. I mean, honestly,
it really helped.
Yeah, no, I cannot agree more. That like now you need to be a detective. Now you really need to start digging for them. If it was easy before, it's not easy anymore. But just because it's not easy doesn't mean that it's impossible. So, you know, actually going in, working to try to find that first job and to take anything that you can find is really important. But if you can find something, which I suspect is going to be the case for a few people who are listening to this right now, it's very important that you keep yourself current. And your school that you've gone to, your ATO that you've done, either your MCC, APS MCC, hopefully training that you've done, or your initial flight school, this is where they need to kind of step up as well. And I think that you should ask for that from your flight school. You should contact them and say, listen, now this has happened. Is there any possibility for me to come in and get a sim session with you, just an hour to keep my MCC skills up? Something that because we get exactly these questions on the airlinepilotclub.com. And one kind of suggestion that we gave was, if you've done your MCC, and you're going to be tested on your MCC skills when you come for your first interview and your sim check anyway. So make sure that at least every second month or so you get together with someone in an FMPT2 or in a simulator somewhere, and you practice a little bit of this to keep your skills going. The same goes for your theoretical skills, because you're going to be getting questions on that on your interview. So that it's really important that you don't just sit back and feel sorry for yourself right now. That you step up and you keep those skills current, because it's going to be needed when the market starts opening up again.
Yeah, indeed. So what I thought we'd do now, because there's quite a few questions that have been streaming in on the right, is Ben's prepared a little presentation which just takes us through his route from how he started and got to the airline. Then once Ben's done that, it's about 5 minutes long, I believe. We'll nip back to you, Petter, and you can give us a quick the airline equivalent of an elevator pitch on Airline Pilot Club and Mentour Pilot.
Sure.
And then we'll turn to questions and have a scroll through and see if we can answer some of those questions.
Perfect.
So Ben, if
great,
we got the right, I should be able to hit this presentation and then let you drive it from there.
Cool. Yeah. Is that coming up now? Is that all on? I can't see it anymore. Cool.
Have you got it?
Yeah. So I just thought it'd be. I have control. Thank you. I thought it'd just be nice. There's a lot of people that are at the end of flight training, but also at these events, the Pilot Careers Live events. There's a lot of people that are also very new, and there's a lot of phrases which are put around there. So, CPL, PPL, hour building. So I thought it'd be nice to have a little quick run through of just the generic sort of bits, really. So. With the flight training overview, I said there's many questions. How will I find £70,000-80,000? Am I good enough? And where do I train? There's things are often thrown around. What grades do I need at school? And it's basically sort of if you're right at the start of this, the way I see it is there's three main ways to pay. Your parents can provide you the funds, so they can gift you it, or you can have early inheritance. Parents can loan you the funds, so they could take a loan out secured against property. Or you can pay for it all yourself, which was the way that I went about it. And it brings me on to this principle, which is called money is equal to time. And basically, the more money or capital you've got to invest in yourself, the quicker you're going to train. So there's often people that say, "Oh, I don't. Where am I going to get £120,000 for? I'm going to get £80,000 from." Don't sort of think of it like that. Just sort of think of it as this sort of variable that the money is equal to time. So if you've got less, it'll take you a bit longer to train. If you've got more, you'll be training a little bit quicker. It doesn't mean that you can't train at all. And it's something that's really important to sort of understand initially. If you're looking at sort of the generic routes, modular is anywhere from £65,000 to £80,000, and it can take you 30 to 48 months on average. You can do it obviously quicker than that, and some flight training schools that are modular often offer an integrated route as well. If you're looking at integrated, you're looking anywhere from sort of £90,000 to £120,000, and that's roughly 18 to 30 months, again, depending on where you go and how busy it is. And I've just sort of break this down into phases, really, specifically more the modular route, but also some integrated schools do offer it in this sense. So you'll do your private pilot's license, you then do a restricted instrument rating, your night rating, class 1 medical. So the reason I put class 1 medical there is you can do all of that sort of stuff without getting a class 1 medical. And in the UK, there's 2 medicals. You've got a class 2, which is for your private pilot's license. But if you want to hold a commercial pilot's license, then you have to go for a class 1 medical. So you can consider when you're going to get that. And if you're out there considering going down the route of being an airline pilot, maybe it's something you want to get pretty sharpish before you start investing any money. I've heard some horror stories of people going to integrated ATOs like class 1, so don't do that. You then need to look at something called hour building, and that's where you're going to get your flying hours up to the minimum requirements. But the biggest sort of barrier is what's called the ATPL exams, the Airline Transport Pilot's License exams. And there's 14 of these. And this is what really is the biggest barrier between you and being able to become a commercial pilot and going on to this second phase of flight training, which is all the commercial bits. And we'll touch on just very shortly what those exams are. But the second phase, as I call it, is when you're going to do your commercial pilot's license, a multi-engine piston rating. You'll do an instrument rating or a competency-based instrument rating. You'll then do an MCC JOC, and then you'll go on to do an airline interview preparation. So we talked, briefly about the differences there in modular training. And one thing I would say is that quality training is certainly important. Doing it on a modern aircraft, I did mine on the DA42, which has a Garmin G1000 glass cockpit. And that's really similar to sort of the PFD and MFD you're going to get in a modern airliner, very similar principles. But also find a flight training school that suits your personal circumstances. So don't feel that you have to go to, if you go modular, the one round the corner, or the same with integrated. So I live in the northwest of the UK, but I travel down to the Midlands every week for a period of about 18 months to go and do my commercial pilot's license and then my multi-engine instrument rating. And it cost me more money staying in hotels and fuel and food, but I found it was really important to do that because I was going to get a better quality of training. One thing I'd also recommend as well, obviously with my YouTube channel, I've filmed all my flight training from before I had my private pilot's license all the way up to getting my first airline job. And I recommend getting the GoPro just to put it in the cockpit and to film each flight and to be able to debrief from it. The biggest benefit of this is you can watch that dodgy landing 3 or 4 times, or your rubbish NDB holds 5 or 6 times, and work out, okay, why was I slightly off there? What went wrong? And with paying for all my flight training myself since I was 16, this to me, even though I have to spend some more money, I do genuinely believe this meant that my overall flight training costs down to a minimum because I was able to work out errors and fly that trip again. Also on my simulator afterwards. Sort of phase 1 timescale then, just quickly, it's kind of like this. So you'll start off, if you have no flying hours, you'll probably get your private pilot's license in around 6 to 12 months. You then do what's called an IRR. You don't have to do an IRR. It's a restricted instrument rating. It's only UK based for you guys in the UK. What that means is you're going to get some instrument experience and you're able to fly IFR in and outside of controlled airspace, as long as it isn't Class A airspace. And that just means you're going to practice an ILS approach. You're going to be able to expose yourself to some slightly inclement weather, you could say, which is similar to how you're going to be operating in a commercial environment. You then look at doing your night rating and then the hour building. And I put down at the bottom there the ATPL exams. So you can actually do these exams alongside doing all flight training if you're going to be doing distance learning. Another option is if you're going integrated. A lot of flight schools, you'll do those ATPL exams in roughly 6 to 8 months, and then you'll get onto the flying phase afterwards, which is very, very similar to this. You then get up to 175 flying hours, and that means that you're ready for phase 2. So you've passed all 14 exams, and you're ready to crack on. As we said, these ATPL exams are the barrier. People don't like them. I describe them like doing a degree in the history of aviation. There's a lot of relevant content in there, but there's also a lot of things which you won't use. And some people have said to dump a lot of the knowledge, stuff that you read. I wouldn't bother doing that. A lot of it, you'll be surprised at what you will need when you get into the airline environment. And these 14 exams range from, you can see in the list, from principles of flight to general navigation, instruments and electronics, operational procedures, and human performance. And human performance is really interesting and one I'd recommend definitely reading up on, because you're going to be using that a lot with your MCC training for how to interact with other pilots. They have to be done in what's called 6 sittings. So a sitting is basically a period of 4 or 5 days, and you've got 18 months from the first exam. I believe at the moment the UKCA have extended this another 6 months. Which means that if you were potentially going to run out of doing your exams due to the sort of COVID crisis, you're able to take them. You can retake any exam 4 times, and I put down there 85% average, and that is important. Some airlines do dictate that if you get underneath 85%, unfortunately, you can't apply to them. And I believe, going off what Ian was saying earlier in regards to the variety of modular candidates and the quality of the training that they've had, that's just to try and make sort of a benchmark, a base mark, really. And then once you've done all the ATPL exams, the best thing is you've actually then got 3 years to get a frozen ATPL. So that's the commercial pilot's license, multi-engine instrument rating, and an MCC jock. So if you are funding it yourself like me, and you're struggling to, to get the end capital to do the commercial element, you've got that 3-year window to do it. Phase 2, as we said, is the commercial multi-engine instrument rating, MCC jock, and airline preparation. So there are companies out there at the moment. I went to one in particular, which help you prepare for that airline interview. Obviously, if there is this bit of a downturn, you need to stand out from the crowd. And the phase 2 can be done a lot quicker. That's why you're going to need the funding there. It's roughly £25,000 to £30,000. You're going to do it in around 6 to 8 months, depending on just exactly how. So in summary, you've got these 2 main phases to modular training, which is also similar to integrated. Choose a flying school which suits your circumstances. Very, very important. Get a GoPro to debrief your flights. And if you want to send me a message about that and what equipment I use, I definitely recommend it. I'm not saying you have to put it on YouTube, make a YouTube channel. A lot of my flights that I filmed, I've never put online. And then pay for quality training. Don't just take the cheapest option that's near you and that's most local. I think nowadays, be expected to travel, be expected to go somewhere that is a bit further away, and invest. Doing it cheap probably won't work. And the money is equal to time principle. So if you're watching this and you're 17, 18 and you've not got 100 grand like I didn't, don't worry, just appreciate that money is equal to time. So the more you've got, the quicker you'll train. The less you've got, the slightly longer it'll take. But it doesn't mean that you're not able to follow your dreams and become a commercial pilot. And that's pretty much it, Ian, from the presentation. A little bit quick there, but appreciate there's lots of questions coming in which we're looking forward to answering.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Ben, and certainly the principle that whole money is equal to time thing is so true in a lot of aspects of life, really, isn't it? But, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, Petter, over to you.
Yes.
I think you want to give us. This is your opportunity. I mean, I should say before I go on and before Petter starts, that if I'm sure everyone knows Petter and Mentour Pilot and Ben and PlaneOldBen channels, but if you don't, then where have you been? But apart from where have you been, you need to go and check out their YouTube channels. Petter, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the Airline Pilot Club?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, an elevator pitch. I'm going to keep it fairly short. So, well, my name is Petter. I'm a 38-year-old training captain on the Boeing 7800, a type rating instructor and a type rating examiner as well, which is pretty much the reason I started my YouTube channel, Mentour Pilot, to begin with, because I wanted to just share my view of my job, which I love. So that was the reason I started the YouTube channel, because I didn't feel that there was any real good positive reviews. Now, I do realize that I only speak for myself and my own job, my own work situations, but I did feel like there was a little bit of that missing on YouTube before, which I tried to kind of plug that void. But this has, during the last 5 years, which I've been working on the channel, it's led to different things. I created a Mentor Aviation app, which is a kind of a social app for people who are interested in aviation. Anything from if you are, a nervous flyer, or if you are an aviation enthusiast on your way into training, or if you are an experienced pilot like myself, where you can go in and ask questions and talk to people. But through that work, I got into contact with, one of my mentors, really, Mr. Andy O'Shea, Captain Andy O'Shea, which used to be the head of training of Ryanair. And he and I had seen, from different directions, we'd seen the same kind of problems. I was in contact with tens of thousands of people who really, really, really wanted to become pilots, but could not see either if they were suitable for it, or if they were, or they felt that they were suitable for it, they could not come up with the money. And in some cases, there were people who just liked aviation, but had never really seriously thought about becoming pilots, because they just saw those money that Ben was talking about as completely inachievable. Like, there was no chance that they would be able to get that kind of money, which meant that they never seriously looked it up as a possibility. Now, Andy at the time, he was obviously looking at it from an airline perspective, which is they needed a lot of good, high-quality pilots to fill their aircraft, while I was seeing it from the other side, from the pilot's perspective. And we thought, together we should probably see if we can do something about this, if we can leverage my reach into the community and his reach into the business, into the training industry, the schools, the airlines, and really do something, try to do something that hasn't really been done before. So what we came up with is that we have 3 different problems that we need to solve. A, we need to find the people. We need to find these talented young women and men who would make fantastic airline pilots. That is number 1. And this is obviously, now this is pre-COVID-19, obviously. So we were seeing what the industry then predicted to be a real shortage of pilots starting from 2022. when the baby boomers inevitably goes into retirement, and with all of the backlog of the orders of all the Airbus 320s and the Boeing 737 Maxes and everything that's there, everything was pointing towards a real shortage starting at that point. So we thought, and the industry thought, if we don't start training them now, then we are not going to be able to fill those aircraft eventually, when there's 90,000 new people or new pilots needed in Asia, 85,000 in North America, 55,000 new trained pilots in Europe. That was the the predictions before this crisis started. So we said, we need to find these people. All right, so where are they? Well, here I could help. I could reach out and tell people like there's potentially a way here for you in. So find them. But then we need to really make sure that these are actually the right people. So at the moment, the way things works is that you go in for your pilot training, you'll go to a flight school. They will, if they're a good flight school, they will provide you with a pre-assessment. Assessments make sure that you have what it takes. If they're a bad flight school, they might not do that. They might say that, don't worry about that. We'll train you to become a pilot and you'll sort that out later on. And in any case, there was a big difference in what different training organizations were doing, what kind of tests they were giving the pilot. And in any case, there was an incentive on the behalf of the flight school to get as many people in training as possible. It was only really when you had a really high quality flight school that was a lot of competition to get into that they really had an incentive to do proper screening. So we thought, all right, we need to find these people. When they've showed us interest that they want to, then we should give them a objective test to start off with. We should give them the opportunity to do a pre-screening. We call it an indicative assessment, where they can go in. They can take an assessment which is very, very close to what they will do for a serious flight school or for an airline later on. They will do this test. And typically, if you do it for an airline or for a flight school, you will just get yes or no. All right, there won't be any more feedback than that. But we thought, since we both come from a training background, feedback is what builds good training. If you don't get feedback, how are you ever going to get better? So this indicative assessment was to be given to anyone who was a member of the Airline Pilot Club, which is what we called this entity. And you do that, you sit down, it's a test that you do at home, and then you wait for it to be analyzed, and then you get back either a green light, which is, okay, we can see from all of these different personality pointers that you seem to have what it takes in order to go for the proper assessment at the flight school. Or, which is what we expect most people will get, is you're almost ready, but you need to work on your numeracy skills or your English language skills or this part of your personality. So do that. Here is what we think that you should do. This is the guidance that we will give you. We will not do the training, but you need to do it and we can point you in the right direction. And then you can retake the indicative assessment. When it is green lighted, then you go forward. So that was step number one, finding the right people. Then, crucially, finding the right flight schools, right? Because there is, or there was, we'll see what happens after this, a sea of different training organizations out there, everything ranging from very small organizations up to the really, really big ones. And you will always, no matter who you speak to, they will always say that they are the best ones. These ones are the best because they have poor weather where they are. These ones are the best because they have good weather where they are. These ones are the best because of old aircraft, and these ones for new aircraft. So you, as someone like you guys probably watching this, it's really, really hard to know what is actually good for you. So once again, an objective view into this, which is I get these questions probably 50 times a day. Which school should I be going to? What should I be thinking about? My view is that I want to give the best possible feedback when it comes to that, but I couldn't do that alone. And Andy, which has all of this experience with actually training hundreds of airline pilots, he also knows what a good training organization looks like. So we could send in a team to schools that were interested to be part in the Airline Pilot Club system and actually do a proper audit of them. Check, what are the syllabus like? What is the instructors, how good are the instructors, how good are the aircraft, and crucially, do they have the correct and the good economy needed in order to run the flight school, not only in good times but in bad times? Because I'm sure that we've all heard horror stories about flight schools that have taken people in at a very cheap price normally, and then somewhere halfway through the training, they go into bankruptcy, take the money, and disappear, which is what happens in a bankruptcy. But this cannot, that cannot be allowed to happen to anyone who's going into this, especially if they're forking out 80, 90,000 euros from their own money. So the right people to the right flight schools, which is going to be very few to start with, but we're hoping that as more and more people see the benefits of this, that we'll be able to reach more people, more flight schools out there and go, because obviously it's going to cost them, the flight schools, a bit of money to get this assessment done, but it's crucial that it is done, because then we can with good honesty say to people in the club that, listen, this school you can go to because we've checked it. These are the parameters that we've checked, and these are the results. Then, and only then, and this is where the kicker came in, we created, together with large financial organization, Aon, we were starting to look into a funding model. And this is something that hasn't happened before in large scale, where banks, we would approach individual banks, say that this is the system we have in force in order to verify the quality on each given step here. And providing that the pilot would be demonstrating good results in the indicative assessment and in the entry exam to the flight school, and the flight school has been verified to be good, that together with a very unique insurance mechanism as well, would then be able to satisfy the bank's safety part to give funding unsecured to the person. So you see, here's where the kind of magic happens, where it's someone who didn't have parents who could give them an inheritance before time, or a loan, or could mortgage their house. Where someone like that, who maybe come from quite poor financial background, could have the possibility to get an unsecured loan if needed. Now, we're also very, very honest with saying that, like I was saying before, we don't recommend you to get a huge unsecured loan, but at least there is a possibility then for people to get trained. And then at the very end, which is step number 3, we get the right people into the right schools and into the right seats, which is where we would try to leverage airlines that were needing pilot to say, like, this is the system. This captain or this Joe Bloggs that has entered by this side has now gone through all of these steps. We can guarantee the quality on each of these steps. He is likely to be a very good candidate. Would you like to at least give him the chance of an interview? So that was the beauty of the Airline Pilot Club, and it still is. We are working on each of these steps. However, the current crisis has obviously made us slow things down a bit, because we didn't feel that this, like, it was appropriate to go forward with opening up the club for this now, when we don't really see, when everything is so foggy in the future. So what we're doing right now is we're leveraging the same reach that I have into the pilot community with the reach that Andy and his team has into the airline business and the flight schools to find good information. So the airlinepilotclub.com is open right now for individuals, pilots, wannabes, people that want to become pilots, or people who are right now, or even people in Ben's position, to go in and ask questions. I wonder what this is and how this is going to work. And then we can then go out and talk to EASA, for example. So what is EASA doing about, for example, extending ATPL exam times now during the crisis? What are flight schools doing to take care of their students and put a little bit of pressure on the flight school, saying, like, listen, you really should be taking care of them. You should be giving them ways to train, for example, during the downtime. You should be giving them allowance for all of this. So that's what we're doing now. And we also have a facility for training organizations to go in and ask the same questions. We know that there's a lot of ATOs out there who might also struggle to get a hold of information. They can go in and they can write their questions in, and we will use whatever we can. It doesn't mean that we can guarantee to give all of the answers. No one can. But we at least we're doing what we can with the reach that we have in order to find proper answers to this. So that's what we're doing at the moment, but the club is still going on. The right people into the right flight schools, into the right seats, that's still going on in the background. And we were hoping to start that up maybe in June, July, when things have gotten a little bit clearer.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. I think if it's okay with both of you, we'll head on over to the questions now. And I've been noting down a few of the questions. Obviously, we can't answer every single one of them. just to kick off with a slightly tricky question, and one to which I don't have an easy way of providing an answer. A couple of people have asked, given specific things, am I too old? How old is too old?
All right.
I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard that. So,
okay. So this is a very this is probably the question that I get the most on my YouTube channel. I do live streams on Sundays and Wednesdays at the moment, and this comes up on every live stream without a question, without a doubt.
You must know the answer then.
Well, the funny thing here is that it obviously it differs a little bit, but it mostly is down to you, right? You kind of decide when you're too old. I know that there are certain training organizations that have put a cap on their integrated training to 35 years to start their integrated training. I have asked those flight schools what that's all about. It seems to be completely arbitrary. The fact is that I have come across cadets. I met one guy, which I always use as an example, by the way. I was in Stansted. I was jump seating back to Barcelona, and I met a guy who's 53. And we started talking, and he said that he was a train driver up until he was 50. And then he decided it would be cool to fly aircraft. And he retrained himself, I think the modular route. And he got a job when he was 51. Or 50 he was when he got a job. And he was now 53, and he was on his way towards command. So that just gives you an idea of what the possibilities are. Now, I do also realize that this kind of differs in different parts of the world. So what I always tell people is make sure that you go in and you maybe take, connections within the airlines, or ask the airlines. The airlines will never say that they have an age policy, because that would be age discrimination. But there might be something unofficial that's going on. So it's good to kind of have that type of knowledge. But generally what keeps people from starting training or making a shift from one job to another as they grow older is flexibility in life. So do you have a wife, a mortgage, a house, and you live in Surrey, and you cannot move away from there, and you need to be home on the weekends to go to soccer games? Well, then it's going to be very hard to do this change. How's your economy doing? Are you able to jump from maybe a fairly well-paid job, which is what's paying for the training most of the time, to a not so well-paid job in the beginning, which is the cadet pilot life in some airlines? Is it possible to do that and move to Romania to do this job?
Yeah, great. Ben, have you got anything on that before I line up the next?
Yeah, question? I mean, the way I look at it is, return investment wise from the airline to the employee. Arguably, if they're older, they're less likely to leave, and it costs, I don't know, an X amount of money to retrain staff and get them back into the business. So from my point of view, if you're slightly older and you apply to a certain airline, I'd like to think that the airline think that they get a good level of service out of you. And if you are 55, you can have another 10 years. I've not really heard of anyone in the 50s retraining, so it's nice to hear that story, Pastor. But certainly people in the 40s, if you're in your mid-40s, you're going to get a 20-year career out of it. Certainly that's a long time. And I think nowadays there's a lot of people in the late 20s and early 30s that I've met at places training. A lot of guys coming out of the military in the 30s and going to airlines. And I just think, just go for it. You only live once. It's cliche advice, isn't it? But you'll just regret not doing it. So, with everything going on in the world right now at the moment, just roll the dice and crack on, really, is my advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Petter, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I couldn't agree more. It's like I said, like we've said from the beginning here, you have to weigh all of your information that you have. Right now, maybe it's not the time to switch from your job as a doctor to an airline pilot. Maybe you should wait a little while to see what's happening with the business. But there's nothing stopping you. I mean, like Ben was saying, you live once, and people are asking me, like, I'm 25. Am I too old to be an airline pilot? And yeah, exactly. The truth is that, in fact, you will benefit from some life experience. If you come over, sit in the right or the left seat of an airliner, it's good to have lived a little bit, to have seen a little bit, to have something in the background that you can base your decisions on when you're taking critical safety decisions. So, like, what you might lack in that agility of a really, really young brain, you will get back in life experience and other things. And that's what we see when we do type ratings as well, where people, if you have cadets together in a group and you have a huge difference in age. So you have some very young 20-year-old guys straight out of flight school, and you have someone who's 32. What you tend to see is that the young guys, they will pick up the SOP, the standard operating procedures, the technical things really, really quickly. So on fixed base levels, they're well ahead of the slightly slower, because I feel myself, I'm 38, that I get slower to learn. They will take that quicker. But then as you go into the end of the fixed base sessions and you start going to the full flight, well, then the older people start gaining speed, and not uncommonly, it actually ends up with even higher results at the end of the type rating because of this, the change or the difference in life experience. So, you're not too old is the answer.
Excellent. Particularly not a bloody 25. Ben.
Even I'm older than that.
Yeah, I'm not even going to mention how old I am. Clearly 21 is the right answer to that one. Again. Someone called Sam said, a PPL is now a good time, wants to be a modular student. Is there any downside to kicking off the ground school now? Particularly if it's a learning ground school?
Yeah, I wouldn't say so. I mean, for the ATPL exams, the nicest thing about them is you can take forever to do them, depending on your own personal circumstances. So for me, I was working full-time at BMW as a salesperson alongside doing all of my commercial flight training, including the exams. So I'd go to work in the morning, get there at like 8:30, work till about 6:30, get home, have dinner, study till 11 o'clock at night, every night for 18 months. It was quite extreme in that sense, but I had the time to do it. So I think the way I was looking at it was I had 6 months really to get myself into module 1 through a distance learning company. 6 months to prepare, get ready for it. And I knew as soon as I took that first exam, I had 18 months to get through the rest of it. And I just took some breaks in between the training. So between module 1 and 2, I had like 2 months off, so my brain reset and decompress a little bit. So you can buy just the initial module. You can I think it was around £1,500 with Bristol Ground School where I did it. So you could buy that, start studying at home, start getting yourself into it before you have to start taking any exams or see what happens with the world at the moment. So I think definitely just get started, and you might just have to accept if it's not for you, you're gonna have to write off that cost. But I doubt it. I think by the time you get into the studying and you'll start enjoying it eventually, that you'll be doing all right. So I think people need to start cracking on and making traction at the moment. Like we've said throughout the whole of this live stream, on a downturn, arguably it's a good time to be training.
Yeah. Talking of which, Petter, question for you: how do pilots who've been furloughed or find themselves grounded, how are they keeping their skills current at the moment? Or are they keeping their skills current?
Well, I think it's a very individual thing. Like for example, I tried. Well, what I'm doing here with Mentour Pilot actually keeps me kind of current, because I keep reading up on things, and I need to be able to answer technical questions about the 737, for example. And the only way to do that is to actually read the manual. So I think the more experience you have, the more you tend to kind of lean back on to maybe brushing up on theory rather than practice. The less experience you have, the more you're going to have to actually sit, and you can build a paper tiger out of some papers of the schematics of the cockpit, for example, which is what I did when I was doing my type rating. I had a couple of cardboard boxes that I put them up on, and you sit and you point at things. It might feel really silly, but if you are like a new cadet that just finished line training and you find yourself now in a break for 2 months, you are going to have to sit and mentally dry fly the aircraft to remember things like scan flows, procedures, read the manuals, and like Ben was saying, you have just get X-Plane. It costs £50 or something to download it from STEM, and you can sit and you can actually look at the panels and you can see what the system responses are, and you can fly a circle approach to like a non-position approach with a circling approach to land with the autopilot, obviously, because hands flying you cannot really practice, but everything else, there is a lot of things out there that you can do to keep yourself current. What you cannot do is just sit back, because if you do, you are going to find yourself being very, very rusty when it's time to get back. Fortunately, there are, of course, rules around this. But still, even if you have, if you haven't flown for 85 days, where 90 days would be the maximum, and you find yourself flying a 4-sector day on your 84th day, coming back, it is going to be tricky.
Yeah. So on a kind of on a linked question, I'll stick with you for now, Petter. For me, someone asked a question saying, in this time, is it worth someone extending their qualifications and effectively qualifying to becoming an SFI, so synthetic flight instructor?
Mm.
I imagine that when all of this starts coming back, there's going to be some massive demand on sim time.
Oh yeah, it's going to be. I can't even fathom the amount of training that will going to be needed by each and every airline when this goes out, because right now, of course, EASA is going to come in and they're going to give some leeway to the airlines from certain rules, right? There's going to be, some procedures you will be able to get a little bit of leeway with, providing that you have established procedures on how to sort it out. But under any circumstance, there's going to be a backlog of training needed. So things like keeping SFI up to date is definitely good. Now, if you're struggling economically, then it's going to be a little bit harder. We in the club, we're advising people to try to keep all of your ratings and everything current if you can, because it's just going to be much easier when things picks up, that you don't have to do a renewal or of any of your ratings. But of course, if it becomes an economical issue, then just pay very, very close attention to how long you can leave your rating. If it's a type rating, for example, lapsed before you end up having to do too much training for it to be economically viable. But things like an SFI, if you have an SFI job somewhere or potential for an SFI job, there's going to be loads and loads of need for that when this is all over.
Yeah, just the money you need to get it. So, Ben, back over to you at the minute. There's a couple of questions here which I thought were quite interesting, although I'm not entirely sure that they're a little bit hoped for. One person asked whether this downturn would be the end of airline supported flight training. I would have probably said it wasn't massively supported by airlines previously anyway, and certainly at the moment I can't see any airlines rushing around to sponsor anyone's training. But I guess the other question, which is an interesting one that none of us really know the answer to, is someone asking, as a result of this, will the schools all get a lot cheaper?
I doubt that. I think they'll probably get more expensive, really. If the demand's still out there, I mean, they'll be struggling financially, won't they? So I can't see any business that might potentially be in a bit of financial difficulty lowering prices. I mean, price elasticity of demand, isn't it? I think from my A-level business, I'm trying to remember. But the demand's still out there. So if the demand's there, they're not going to be lowering the price. They'll probably try and control the demand. Might put the prices up slightly. If there's a lot of demand still out there, I don't know. I just think to worry about that sort of stuff for now. Just concentrate on finding a school which offers high quality training and fits your personal circumstances. The price, sadly, with a lot of this is the price, depending on your personal circumstances. But just find good training. That's really important. You need to come out of this at the end being a chiseled, ready product, ready to apply for that first airline job. It's a lot of money. That's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Training shouldn't really be seen as just a commodity and buy the cheapest possible training you can find.
I could have gone for cheaper local training and it didn't.
Yeah, no, indeed. And a quick specific question that someone's just asked, just reading now: is it best to purchase 14 ATPL modules and complete tests instead of completing the 9 PPL tests? No, because you have to have a PPL before you can start the ATPL. So even I can.
Yeah, that's right.
Petter, quick question, and I've only seen one of them here, and that was the question: how many girl pilots are there? Where are all the girl pilots?
Yeah, there are too few of them. That's the straight and honest answer. At the moment, we're looking at about 5% of the total pilot body, which represent almost exactly what I have on my YouTube channel as well, which just shows the structural problem that we're facing. So at the moment, obviously, if there's no need for new pilots, it's not really an issue. But as I was saying, as we foresee going in maybe 5 years into the future, where there is going to be a bigger need for pilots potentially, then we are going to need more girls to fly, because we need the best pilots. We don't need the best male pilots. We need the best pilots, and they might well be, should be, statistically 50-50 female and male. So they are there. Some airlines have done great job with trying to push for more female pilots in, to get more girls in flying, because it's healthy from an organizational point of view as well. But there's more work needed. That's the sad answer to it.
Yeah, and just clicking over to Ben here, because there's a question that was specifically for you and a linked question as well, probably specifically you, because you were the one talking when it was posted. How do you recommend approaching mental health issues after redundancy? And another question, is mental health issue a turn-off for the airline? So we'll chat with you and then go to Petter on that one. I mean, very little insight into that myself.
Yeah, no, same, to be honest. I mean, from my point of view, it is, a big thing to have trained for about 4 or 5 years, got your first job, and the airline goes into administration, and you're not in a job, and then there's a COVID-19 crisis, and the industry looks on a downturn, and lots of questions about what you should do. But I think just staying positive, it's not the end of the world. I'm keeping fit and healthy. I'm trying to study at home as much as I can, keep current, playing on X-Plane, NTB Holbs, fly different variety of aircraft, think about MCC. I can FaceTime friends and talk through different things. Again, I'm talking to people at other airlines and seeing what's happening there. But for me personally, I'm not just one person. There's 650 pilots at Flybe. They're in the same situation, and we're taking time to talk to each other and confide in each other, really, and seek out different opportunities. I think you've got to have a certain level of grit to be an airline pilot. There's a lot you need to achieve, lots of boxes to tick. So I'm just trying to keep motivated. I've been using a treadmill at home, things like that, keeping the old drink down, not drinking too much, eating healthy, that sort of thing, really. In regards to the other question about mental health, I don't know. I've not been exposed to that. I don't really personally know anybody in that situation. I don't know if Petter knows a bit more about that.
Before I pass over to Petter, someone's just playing PlaneOldBen, legend.
Thanks.
Right. Have you got anything for that?
Mental health issues is facing the pilot body just like any other professional body out there. There are people that has mental health issues. There are people who will get mental health issues, and it is imperative that we as an industry tackle that in a professional way. So the second part of the question was whether or not airlines would see it as a negative thing if you've had mental health issues. And the answer to that is that it should not be, because any one of us can find ourselves in, especially days like this, in financial straits or in marital issues or something that might lead into depression. And the most important thing for an industry like ours is, of course, that if someone does find them, we are not superhuman. Like, we are just like average Joe out there. And if you find yourself in a situation where you do need help, then there needs to be consensus in the industry that a pilot should be able to go to their base captain or to their chief pilot or whoever it is that's dealing with their roster and say, listen, I'm not feeling well. I need to take time off to deal with this. And there shouldn't be a stigma connected to it. Now, that's the perfect world. In real world, after Germanwings, there probably is a bit of a stigma, and here is where once again we as an industry, I think, need to work very, very hard on this, because the worst thing that can happen, and what probably has happened a little bit because of the Germanwing sidestep, like there's from most aviation accidents out there's lessons to be learned that improves the safety of the overall airline business. Germanwings is one of those few horrible accidents where nothing good has come out of it. Nothing has become better because of that. Because, like, if it becomes a stigma, if it becomes a bigger stigma, especially out in the eyes of the traveling public, well, then what we face potentially, which just cannot happen, is that pilots become afraid of speaking up. Pilot becomes afraid of getting help when needed. They drive it underground. And then you might find people flying when they shouldn't. So that's what I feel from a mental health point of view. It is very, very important that both the airlines and the governing authorities, the EASA in our case, or the FAA in the case of the US, goes out and says that very clearly. Like, anyone can have a bout of this. It will be dealt with by professionals. You will be evaluated according to very, very specific and clear medical grounds. And when you're done with it, when you're out of it, you're out of it, and you can continue to fly. That's my point of view.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. We've been running for just over an hour now. This is the first live stream we've done on Pilot Career News, so I think we've probably got to the end of our how much we can get people to cope with, as it were. There's a bunch of other questions there. What I'll do is I'll after this I'll collate some of the questions, and then if I think if we can get another video together and maybe someone answer those questions at some stage in the future, we'll do that, and maybe do that as another live stream. So I'd like to thank you all very much. I'd like to remind everybody watching to go and check out the YouTube channels of Mentour Pilot and PlaneOldBen. If you're watching this on YouTube later, I'd like to ask you to click that old subscribe button and click the bell and give us a thumbs up and all those other good things that you do on YouTube. And again, lastly, I'd just like to thank you both for spending an hour of your Saturday afternoon when I'm sure it's, well, I don't know if it's sunny outside where you are, PlaneOldBen, but I'm sure it's sunny where you are in Spain.
It's not bad up north.
Yeah, it's okay.
Anyway, really, so it's sunny inside. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for everyone who sort of took part and asked questions and stayed with us. We'll hopefully see you all again. Nice. I think the takeaways really is, if you're doing your research, do wide research and look at research with a critical eye and look at where it's coming from. And above all, stay positive and keep bashing away those NDB holds.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that all night.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you very much, everyone. Let's click that end broadcast.